My parents, who were entitled, have ruined every birthday since my sister was born. They have permitted my sister to snuff out my birthday candles and to receive all of my gifts and presents. After 8 years of anguish, I eventually snapped and disclosed the truth to my parents. As a consequence, my entire family has now aligned with me and has turned against my parents for their abhorrent conduct and their complete disregard for my well-being. Additionally, I am genuinely astounded by the manner in which the situation unfolded. The following transpired. I am 18 years old and have recently become independent of my parents. My sister is approximately 10 years younger than I am. She experienced an unplanned pregnancy and was on the brink of not surviving to term. I am not well informed about the specifics of my mother's second pregnancy, as I was not provided with a detailed account. However, I am aware that it was so taxing on her body that she was unable to conceive after my sister was born. Throughout that year, she was hospitalized on numerous occasions. The birth was also nearly fatal for my mother. It caused her and my father to become very attached to my younger sister, as she could have never been born. Since that time, I have experienced a sense of being reduced to the status of an ordinary juvenile in the household. I required a free caregiver. The degree of favoritism my parents demonstrated over an extended period has led me to believe that they are legitimately mentally ill for failing to recognize the impact it was having on me. Consequently, it is now reverberating back at them. Starting with my 11th birthday, my parents desired that I allow my sister to blow out my candles, as she was 2 years old and wept upon seeing a birthday cake that was not hers. Despite my reluctance to participate, my parents coerced me into it, and they relit the candles for me to repeat the process after her. Utterly destroyed. The occurrence was repeated in the subsequent year, the year after that, and so forth. They continued to enforce it until it became the accepted practice. Additionally, my sister was required to provide me with gifts on my birthdays. Additionally, I was never able to acquire any of her possessions. And when I inquired as to why, they simply replied that I am a male and that boys are not as concerned about it. I acknowledged that I was a child, but did they truly believe that this was the most intelligent or appropriate line of speech? I do not believe so. Additionally, my parents consistently select a location that my sister would prefer to attend on my birthday, rather than one that I would prefer. Eventually, it reached a point where my sister was celebrating 2 anniversaries annually while I was not. In addition, my parents centered their entire existence around my sister. My sister was required to share my enthusiasm for any endeavor that I desired. Unless I could complete it independently, it was vetoed. I ultimately developed the habit of isolating myself in my bedroom with my video games, as they did not appear to be a source of anxiety for me. That is, unless my sister intended to enter my room and cause me distress. Consequently, I always install a lock on the door. I was an angry adolescent who was tired of being intruded on at any given moment, and my parents wanted me to remove it. However, I panicked. My parents were displeased with me for being nude in my own room, and my sister repeatedly ran into the room when I was without clothing. When I emphasized the absurdity of that, they relinquished their objection and permitted me to retain the lock. As a result of the daily pampering she received, my sister developed a significant royalty complex. Additionally, she was exceedingly exacting. Therefore, I endeavored to separate myself from her to the greatest extent feasible. I employed any rationalization that would permit me to avoid her, even if I had to fabricate information in order to have personal leisure. My parents employed a teenage lady as a babysitter, which allowed me to enjoy more personal time. However, the caregiver ultimately resigned due to my sister's refusal to listen to her, and my parents attempted to prevent her from receiving payment by claiming that she performed poorly. The girl enlisted the assistance of additional individuals, and my parents ultimately fulfilled their obligation to her. Then, they employed an additional female to provide regular childcare, and she ultimately remained. However, my parents were explicit that I was to supervise my sister on any day that I was available. I made an effort to ensure that I was occupied, particularly at my part-time job, if possible. My sister treated me as her personal attendant and directed my movements. She even had a silly nickname for me that she would not stop using, and the mere mention of it causes my wrath to boil. And if I failed to fulfill her every desire, she would weep and contact our parents, which would result in me being reprimanded for mistreating her. Due to this, we engaged in numerous significant disputes. My relationship with my parents devolved into a state of near silence for an extended period of time after I refused to yield any further. Nevertheless, during my high school graduation, they had the audacity to boast to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. Well, they were not entirely incorrect, however. The rationale they were considering was not the actual one that transpired. I exerted myself diligently in anticipation of the day when I would eventually be liberated from my parents. However, my parents appeared to have accomplished a great deal. That is, They may have done so prior to the birth of my sister, however, it was exclusively about her thereafter. Until parent-teacher conferences were scheduled, they did not inquire about my academic experiences. I obtained a B and C average upon my graduation. Despite the fact that the trip was intended to be for my 18th birthday in July, my parents took me to a location where my sister would always have more fun than me. However, the situation quickly escalated, despite the fact that it was my birthday. The event did not feel entirely focused on me, and I was hoping that we would be dining at my preferred restaurant. However, the celebration was held at a local imitation of Chuck E. Cheese, which is the only establishment of its kind in the vicinity. Therefore, it served as the default celebratory destination for any significant accomplishment, including my high school graduation. However, I did inform them that my sister would likely derive greater pleasure from the location than I would. I was inundated with boredom, as I was surrounded by children who were half my age and were hosting parties. I was compelled to consume subpar pizza and engage in outdated arcade games and claw machines in order to obtain tickets for subpar rewards that did not bring me any pleasure. It was then time for cake, and my parents presented me with a pink cake adorned with white blossoms. It was evident that the cake was not intended for boys, despite the fact that it bore my name. My parents ignited the candles and placed them directly in front of my sister for her to extinguish. That was the moment when it ultimately transpired. I experienced a mental moment in which all of the pent-up hatred flashed before my eyes. I then began to weep uncontrollably. In the presence of my entire family, I, an 18-year-old lad, wept. Time appeared to have frozen as a result of the collective trauma. I rose from my seat, and the contents of my mind that I had been suppressing for the previous 8 years were suddenly released in a torrent of words. This event was observed by the complete family, and when it was eventually concluded, they went outside to sit by the family car. Several relatives followed me out to express their apologies and the fact that they were unaware of the pink cake, as my parents had kept it covered until it was served. I stated that it was irrelevant that they were unaware. Little Miss Sunshine has dominated my existence for the past 8 years, while they all sat back and observed. I never had any genuine anniversaries or celebrations of my own. They were entirely focused on her, and on the most significant birthday of my life. They all anticipated that I would simply smile and nod as usual, as they presented my sister with a cake that was specifically intended for her, despite the fact that it was not her birthday. Some of them began to offer me apologies, however. They defended themselves by claiming that they had assumed I was in agreement with the situation, because my parents had stated so. I informed them that I was never comfortable with it, and my parents insisted that I do so each year until I eventually pretended to embrace it. I was never given the opportunity to have any of my friends attend, as my parents forbade me from inviting them long ago after they attempted to express their disapproval of my sister's ability to blow out my candles. There are 365 days in a year. Additionally, was it truly that detrimental to desire a relationship that was solely focused on me rather than her? Instead, I am maligned as the entitled, greedy child who desires my own birthday. Then, I reverted to ugly weeping. At that juncture, my father returned to the exterior to reprimand me for causing such a significant disturbance. My mother was also in tears, and my sister was displeased that I had marred her moment. As a result, all those present believed that my parents were uncaring. I ultimately yelled at him, asserting that they are unsuitable parents and that he should be aware of the reason. I suppose it is better late than never, but I had never witnessed anything like it before, as the rest of the family descended on him like a pack of canines after I said that. My father was nearly encircled by the restaurant's entrance, and the majority of my grandparents remained with me to apologize for their prolonged inactivity. I am unaware of the conversation that transpired between my parents and the restaurant staff, but it was approximately 30 minutes before they emerged. Upon their return, they appeared dejected. My mother was still sniffling, after crying so intensely, and neither of my parents could look me in the eye. They both hesitantly apologized for their actions and subsequently proposed that the party be rescheduled to a different location. However, this was insufficient for the audience. One of my uncles scoffed audibly in the audience, and my parents declared that they would never permit my younger sister to blow out my candles, give her gifts on my birthday, or make any aspect of the occasion about her. My parents also apologized, and there was another scoff, receiving a cake that was clearly not intended for me, and that they simply believed that I was no longer concerned about cake at my age, and yes, was that the wrong thing to say? I was incensed once more and once more shouted at them, asserting that my age was irrelevant. My sister was given my birthday without any justification, and they were aware of this. I then stated that it was futile to reschedule the celebration, as it was already too late. They unequivocally demonstrate that I am of no consequence to them. Adult. What future anniversaries with him could I anticipate? My father became enraged at me for uttering that statement. However, he abstained from speaking after the entire family shouted at him. My grandfather informed him that I am entirely correct, and it is impossible for them to reverse the current damage. He claimed that my parents were unkind, treated me as the black sheep, and played favorite since my sister was born. Furthermore, each individual was self-destructive, as they permitted the situation to unfold, and I am entitled to much more than a mere contrition. I owed my existence back. My mother once more experienced a breakdown and attempted to approach me, while simultaneously apologizing and weeping for my name. However, I refused to allow her to approach me, and half of the family prevented them from approaching. I abruptly stated that I was unable to endure this situation any longer and began to depart. One of my relatives pursued me and retrieved me. I could hear my parents being yelled at and cursed by numerous family members, but I was so distraught. After all of this, I was unable to experience any sense of joy for any measure of justice. Additionally, where was my sibling during the entirety of this event? She was still in the restaurant alone, enjoying cake and unwrapping presents that were intended for me, in the event that anyone was curious. Indeed, my parents served her cake after I wept and left. It would appear that not doing so would have been their primary concern at the time, but they were later criticized for it. While everyone else cleared out the party, my grandparents convinced me to calm down and wait in their old minivan. After being discovered opening one of my presents, my sister launched a massive temper tantrum and broke it against the wall, as she was not permitted to keep it. The gift was a brand new smartphone. A few months prior, she had acquired a new phone on her birthday. I was ranting about how I never wanted to observe my birthday again, and my grandparents allowed me to spend the night at their home. Upon my return home, I continued to refrain from conversing with my parents. My mother was constantly weeping as a result of my refusal to engage in conversation with her, and my father was equally as uncommunicative with me as I was with him. My grandparents persuaded me to accompany them to dinner the following weekend. Also, upon our arrival, I was taken aback by the fact that a new party was prepared for me. My parents were present, and they maintained an expression of "don't hate us" throughout the duration of the event. A large chocolate cake with 18 candles was present, and a banner bearing my name was also present. They referred to it as my joyful belated birthday graduation party, as I did not receive either of them this year. I did have to appear to be happy, but one good party does not undo 8 years of favoritism, or even make a dent in it. Additionally, where was my sister? She was seated at the table with her arms folded and her lip curved, as it was no longer solely about her. Rather than singing happy birthday for me, they sang an alternate version called Happy Day Then. Immediately after I extinguished the candles, my sister let out a loud, ear-piercing scream. My parents were compelled to escort her out, only to have her return later, looking even more agitated. She remained in her seat and quietly pouted for the remainder of the party. I was also deprived of a new smartphone, as well as other items that she had accumulated at the previous party. However, the smartphone was not the sole factor. The entire family had contributed to my purchase of a vehicle. I fell in love with the old, white Volvo the instant I saw it. My grandfather is knowledgeable about automobiles and has personally repaired them. I was overjoyed. However, my sister's distress was evident in her subsequent shriek. She commenced a severe temper tantrum and demanded a vehicle of her own. My mother was required to accompany her to the restroom, and they were unable to emerge for an extended period of time. My father returned to his previous demeanor of defeat. My sister had effectively undermined their endeavor to present themselves in a positive light in front of the entire family. My parents also expressed to numerous family members that my sister's behavior was a result of their upbringing, which had shaped her into a pampered, princess-like brat. I immediately began operating the vehicle. However, my sister vandalized it by smashing 2 of the side windows with a hammer a few days later, rendering it undrivable. My parents were able to prevent her from causing any further damage. However, she screamed like a maniac when they seized her and removed the hammer, and she subsequently attempted to bite them. Subsequently, my grandfather had invested a significant amount of time and effort into the automobile, which my sister had subsequently destroyed during a severe temper episode. My grandparents were particularly enraged by this incident. My sister was so favored by my grandparents that she was unable to fathom the idea that I could possess something that she was unable to. Additionally, my parents were criticized by several other family members for producing an entitled child in my sister who anticipates receiving the world. She will have a miserable adult life as a result of their failure to enforce discipline and instill a sense of respect in her. Nevertheless, her actions were not unpunished. My sister was relegated to boarding school at the commencement of the new academic year, and she was suspended for the remainder of the summer. Even though my mother wept like an infant, my father was adamant that it was the only way to begin undoing the damage they had caused. Certainly, they recognized their error. I mean, it was somewhat difficult for them to refrain from doing so, as no one supported them at all. My sibling is experiencing an extreme amount of distress at that institution. She has been lying almost continuously, and she has a strong aversion to the rules and the clothes. However, she is no longer able to get away with any of it, as cameras are now present in nearly every location. Our parents attempted to visit her on numerous occasions, however. She responded by screaming at them for placing her in that situation. Based on my understanding, this may be the extent of her academic career until she reaches the age of 18. I am grateful that my parents did not cover the cost of repairing my vehicle. The windows and windshield were replaced by an auto glass company, and they appear to have been recently installed. In August, my father approached me and informed me that he had secured a position for me at a friend's business. However, the job was located 40 miles away, necessitating that I vacate my parents' residence, unless I desired to commute. However, you know what? I was entirely in favor of relocation. However, the process of locating one's initial domicile was not as straightforward. In order to be accepted into a studio, I was required to obtain approval for a credit card. However, I acquired it and have been residing in my current location since September. I rarely communicate with my parents, despite their persistent efforts to reach me. I experience a sense of awkwardness and unease whenever we engage in conversation. My grandfather has proposed that they are unwilling to recognize the extent of their parental shortcomings and that they are hoping that by pleading for my forgiveness, they will feel more positive about themselves. However, I will not be able to absolve them in the near future. I have finally found happiness and am no longer in their presence, and they are now without anything. They do not have my sister or me, and my parents were required to work additional hours due to the high cost of boarding school for my sister. Additionally, I am unable to fathom the cost of the party they threw for me or the modifications they made to my car. They are left with nothing but their labor, angry relatives, and an empty house. I am not amused by the overwhelming anguish that I am experiencing, however. It is the consequence of their own actions. Therefore, what is the matter? They were entitled to it. This narrative is profoundly distressing. How absurd can these people be? Their entire existence was centered on this single daughter, and they completely neglected their son. This infant, who was spoiled, was essentially permitted to govern the household. Furthermore, it is possible that the child was the one who reared the parents, rather than the other way around. Additionally, this is entirely intolerable. I mean, what were they thinking when they treated someone in that manner? It is unjust. It is an act of unmitigated disgust. I am extremely relieved that the original poster was able to escape the family, particularly their parents. It is also wonderful to observe that his extended family provided him with the assistance he required at the exact moment. And this was all due to his parents' failure to provide him with the support he needed. However, the narrative concluded in a remarkable manner, and I sincerely hope that the original poster is able to achieve happiness and tranquility. I hope that they will never have to interact with their parents again, as they do not appear to be virtuous individuals, and the original poster does not require that level of energy in their life. My entitled aunt and her family are attempting to obtain low-income housing by using my parents' address, despite the fact that they are more than capable of purchasing a home. My father's siblings and their families immigrated to the United States approximately 4 to 5 years ago. My father submitted an application for them and remitted all applicable fees. Upon their arrival, he assisted them in securing housing, employment, and enrollment in institutions for their children. His siblings essentially behaved as if he had done nothing for them, despite the fact that he had done all of that. Additionally, they exchanged kisses with my father's younger sibling, who was already in the United States. They believed that my father's assistance was unnecessary, and that my younger brother would be able to assist them. In reality, the younger sibling managed to deceive several of them, which is a compelling narrative in its own right. However, approximately 3 weeks ago, my parents were requested by one of my aunts and her oldest son, Kay, to include their address in their application for low-income housing in the city where my parents reside. My father stated that they are permitted to utilize the address, however, he will not be affixing their names to any utility bills. My aunt and Kay suggested that my parents assist their family, however. My father informed them that he had already provided them with sufficient assistance previously this week. This time, they presented a housing application that required my father to declare himself as my aunt's landlord. Kay instructed my father to sign the document and then proceed to complete the remaining portions, which is highly unethical. No, my father once more informed them. Kay's mother inquired as to why they are applying for low-income housing rather than purchasing a residence. They have sufficient funds to cover a down payment, as indicated by their previous discussions. Kay is employed as an engineer, and 2 other members of the family are also employed. Consequently, they generate a respectable income. Kay expressed his reluctance to do so, as it would necessitate obtaining a loan and paying interest, which is prohibited by his religion. Although this is accurate, my mother did point out that Kay and my aunt were deceiving, which would also be detrimental to their religious beliefs. They are not only fabricating information regarding their residence, but they are also fabricating information regarding their circumstances. My aunt, her spouse, and one of her daughters would comprise the application. Nevertheless, K would also reside there, and his income would suffice to eliminate them entirely. K and my aunt ultimately departed. It appears that my parents are being advised to discard the application, as they are opting to be self-centered and not assist their family. As is customary, my father's family is self-centered and has a short-term memory regarding the time and money we have already allocated to them. What kind of entitlement does it require to visit one's family and not only request that they sign a form without providing an explanation of its purpose, but also to essentially mislead the government regarding one's housing and financial circumstances? They would be disqualified immediately for falsifying this form and would be evicted from their home, all because this K individual refuses to pay a mortgage loan, despite the fact that he is an engineer and can certainly afford it. On the whole, this behavior is extremely poor. Additionally, the original poster is left with a sour taste in their mouth due to the fact that they were so unkind to their father, all while attempting to rationalize their actions based on their religious beliefs. In my opinion, this is an extremely noxious behavior. I commend the father for asserting his authority and declining to provide his name or address for the low-income accommodation that he does not require. If anything, it is time for these individuals to take a stand and actually implement the principles they advocate, rather than attempting to defraud the federal government in order to secure affordable housing. I appreciate your attention. Ensure that you activate notifications by clicking the chime upon subscribing. To complete the listening experience of all the stories, utilize the playlist located at the top of the description. The following time you live stream, utilize the Cream of the Crop soundtrack. Search for Cream of the Stream on Spotify or your preferred platform to locate copyright-free music for your subsequent stream.